Hashtag the hook. The radio crackled with desperation. We've lost another team, came the voice, heavy with exhaustion and fear. 3 more good men down. These snipers, they're like ghosts. We can't even see where the shots are coming from. In a war where technology ruled the battlefield, where drones could spot an enemy from miles away and satellites could read license plates from space, something ancient and deadly was winning. Hidden in the shadows of a war-torn city, enemy snipers had turned the streets into a killing field. Elite Navy SEALs, the most trained warriors in the world, were being picked off one by one. For months, these invisible killers had held an entire district hostage. No one could move without risking death. No one could find them. No one could stop them. The military's best attempts had failed. Their most advanced equipment was useless. Their most experienced soldiers were falling. Then, she arrived. A woman whose name would become legend. A shooter whose skills would defy belief. In her hands was just a rifle and a lifetime of training that would prove that sometimes the most human touch could accomplish what all the technology in the world could not. This is the story of how one woman's deadly precision turned the tide of an impossible battle, saving countless lives and earning the respect of the world's most elite warriors. But before she became a hero, she was just another soldier facing the most dangerous assignment of her career. The armored vehicle bounced violently as it hit another pothole, sending Sergeant First Class Maria Santos crashing into the soldier beside her. The convoy had been moving for 3 hours through what used to be the main commercial district of the city, but now looked like something from an apocalypse movie. Buildings stood like broken teeth, their windows blown out, their walls pockmarked with bullet holes and shrapnel marks. Maria adjusted her grip on her custom M24 sniper rifle, feeling the familiar weight that had become like an extension of her body over the past 8 years of military service. She had been pulled from her unit just 48 hours ago with orders that were both simple and terrifying. Eliminate the enemy snipers that had been terrorizing coalition forces for the past 4 months. The briefing had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. Usually, military intelligence could provide detailed information about enemy positions, numbers, and capabilities. This time, the intelligence officer had spread out photos on the table that showed nothing but empty buildings and shadowy alleyways. "We know they're there," Lieutenant Colonel James Rodriguez had said, pointing to various locations on the map. "We've lost 17 soldiers in this sector alone. But we can't see them. Our thermal imaging picks up nothing. Our surveillance drones find empty rooms. Our ground reconnaissance teams report no movement. Yet every day, more of our people don't come home." Maria had studied the photos carefully. Each one showed the aftermath of a sniper attack. The precision was incredible. Single shots to the head or heart. No wasted ammunition. No missed targets. Whoever these enemy shooters were, they were professionals of the highest caliber. "What about counter-sniper teams?" she had asked. "Surely the SEALs have tried to take them out." The colonel's expression had grown grim. 3 different SEAL teams have attempted to neutralize these targets. Team Alpha lost 2 men before they had to extract. Team Bravo managed to identify one possible position, but when they moved in, they found it empty. The sniper had already moved and took out their spotter from a completely different building. Team Charlie. He paused, his jaw tightening. Team Charlie lost their entire Overwatch element. 4 of the Navy's best snipers, dead in less than 10 minutes. The weight of that information had settled over Maria like a heavy blanket. If Navy SEALs couldn't handle these enemy shooters, what chance did she have? But she had also felt something else, a burning determination that had driven her throughout her military career. Maria Santos had grown up in a small town in Texas where hunting was a way of life. Her father had put a rifle in her hands when she was 8 years old, teaching her not just how to shoot, but how to think like prey and predator simultaneously. By the time she was 12, she could hit a moving target at 300 yards. By 16, she was winning state-level marksmanship competitions. When she joined the Army at 18, her shooting abilities had quickly caught the attention of her superiors. She had been fast-tracked through sniper school, where she had not only graduated at the top of her class but had broken several long-standing records. Her longest confirmed kill was 1,847 yards, made during a previous deployment where she had saved an entire platoon from an enemy machine gun position. But this mission was different. This wasn't about making one perfect shot from a hidden position. This was about hunting other hunters, facing opponents who were every bit as skilled and experienced as she was. The vehicle came to a sudden stop, jarring Maria from her thoughts. The convoy commander's voice crackled over the radio. End of the line. Everyone out. Stay low and move fast. Maria climbed out of the armored vehicle and immediately felt exposed. Even though they were supposedly in a safe zone, she could feel invisible eyes watching from the broken windows and shadowed doorways around them. Her training had taught her to trust her instincts, and, right now, every instinct was screaming danger. The forward operating base they had reached was more of a fortified compound than a traditional military installation. Concrete barriers, razor wire, and sandbags created a maze of defensive positions. Soldiers moved quickly between buildings, never staying in the open for more than a few seconds at a time. Captain David Miller, the base commander, met them at the entrance. He was a tall, lean man with prematurely gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. His handshake was firm, but Maria could see the stress lines around his eyes. "Sergeant Santos," he said, "I hope you're as good as your reputation suggests, because we're running out of options here." He led her to the command center, a reinforced bunker that served as the nerve center for operations in this sector. The walls were covered with maps, photographs, and status boards tracking friendly forces and known enemy positions. What struck Maria immediately was how many red markers there were on the map, indicating areas where coalition forces had taken sniper fire. "The enemy has effectively shut down movement in a 12-square-block area," Captain Miller explained, pointing to the map. "We can't get supplies through. We can't evacuate wounded. We can't even send out patrols without losing people. These snipers have turned this place into a no-man's land." A young intelligence analyst, Corporal Jennifer Hayes, approached with a thick folder. "Ma'am, here's everything we've compiled on the enemy sniper activity. Ballistics reports, trajectory analyses, timestamps of attacks, casualty reports, everything we have." Maria opened the folder and began studying the documents. What she saw made her respect for her opponents grow even more. The attacks showed a level of coordination and planning that suggested these weren't just individual shooters acting independently. There was a system at work here, a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to maximize psychological impact while minimizing exposure. The ballistics reports revealed that the enemy was using a variety of weapons, from Soviet-era Dragunov rifles to more modern Western firearms. This suggested either a well-supplied enemy force or individuals with access to multiple weapon systems. The trajectory analyses showed that shots were coming from different elevations and angles, making it impossible to predict where the next attack would come from. But it was the timing of the attacks that really caught Maria's attention. The enemy snipers never struck from the same position twice. They would take a shot, then disappear completely, only to emerge hours or even days later from a completely different location. They seemed to have an intimate knowledge of the city's layout and an uncanny ability to move unseen through areas that coalition forces had supposedly cleared. "How many enemy shooters are we dealing with?" Maria asked. Captain Miller exchanged glances with Corporal Hayes. "Best estimate is between 3 and 5 individuals. But they're so effective at concealment and movement that it might as well be 20. As Maria continued studying the intelligence files, she began to understand why the SEALs had struggled with this mission. They were dealing with an enemy that had adapted perfectly to urban warfare, using the city itself as both weapon and shield. Traditional military tactics, designed for conventional warfare, were proving inadequate against opponents who fought like shadows. The radio suddenly squawked to life with an urgent transmission. "Base, this is Patrol 7. We're taking sniper fire from grid reference 4-7-2-8. Request immediate support. We have 2 men down." Captain Miller rushed to the radio as the operations center erupted into controlled chaos. Maria could hear the fear and desperation in the patrol leader's voice as he called out positions and status updates. This was happening in real time, and people were dying while she stood there reading reports. "Patrol 7, this is base," Captain Miller responded. "Can you identify the shooter's position?" "Negative, base. Shots seem to be coming from the tall building to our northeast, but we can't get a visual. Every time someone tries to look, they take fire. Maria moved to the map and found the grid reference. The patrol was pinned down in an intersection surrounded by multi-story buildings, any of which could be hiding the enemy sniper. It was a perfect kill zone, and the enemy had chosen their moment perfectly. "Sir," Maria said to Captain Miller, "I need to get up there." The captain looked at her with surprise. "You just got here. Don't you need time to study the area, plan your approach?" "People are dying right now," Maria replied, already checking her equipment. "I can study the area from an overwatch position while providing immediate support to that patrol." Captain Miller nodded grimly. "Corporal Hayes will guide you to our best observation post." "But, Sergeant Santos." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "These enemy snipers have killed some very good people. Don't underestimate them." Maria slung her rifle across her back and gathered her gear. As she prepared to leave the relative safety of the command bunker, she felt the familiar pre-combat mixture of fear and anticipation. She had faced dangerous opponents before, but never ones with such a deadly reputation. The observation post was located on the third floor of a partially destroyed office building about 400 yards from where the patrol was pinned down. Maria and Corporal Hayes moved through the building carefully, avoiding areas where their silhouettes might be visible from outside. The corporal had clearly done this many times before, moving with the practiced caution of someone who understood that any mistake could be fatal. "This is our primary overwatch position," Hayes whispered as they reached a room with a clear view of the intersection where the patrol was trapped. "We've got good sight lines, multiple escape routes, and decent concealment." Maria moved to the window and immediately began scanning the area through her rifle scope. The patrol was exactly where the grid reference had indicated, 5 soldiers using 2 damaged vehicles for cover while a 6th lay motionless in the open intersection. She could see muzzle flashes as the soldiers returned fire, but their shots seemed to be aimed at empty windows and shadows. "Where's the enemy position?" she asked Hayes. "That's the problem, ma'am. We never know until they shoot, and by then, it's usually too late." As if summoned by their conversation, a single gunshot rang out across the intersection. Maria saw one of the pinned soldiers spin and fall, clutching his shoulder. The shot had come from somewhere to the northeast, just as the patrol leader had reported, but Maria couldn't identify the exact location. She began a systematic scan of every window, every rooftop, every possible hiding place where an enemy sniper might be concealed. Her training had taught her to think like her opponent. Where would I position myself for this shot? What angles would give me the best field of fire while maintaining concealment and escape routes? The buildings in this area were a mixture of residential apartments and commercial structures, most showing significant damage from months of urban warfare. Many windows were blown out, creating dark openings that could hide a shooter. Rooftops were littered with debris that could provide both concealment and firing positions. "Base, this is Patrol 7, the radio crackled. "We need that medevac now. Johnson's hit bad, and we're running low on ammo." Maria keyed her radio. "Patrol 7, this is Overwatch. I'm scanning for the shooter now. Can you give me more specific information about the direction of incoming fire?" "Overwatch, the shots seem to be coming from that big apartment building about 200 meters to our northeast. But every time we try to spot the shooter, we take more fire." Maria focused her scope on the apartment building the patrol leader had indicated. It was a 6-story structure with dozens of windows facing the intersection. Any one of them could be hiding the enemy sniper. But as she studied the building more carefully, she noticed something that made her pause. Most of the windows showed evidence of previous damage, with broken glass and impact marks clearly visible. But there were a few windows that looked different. They were too dark, too uniform in their darkness. It was as if they had been deliberately obscured from the inside. She was focusing on one of these suspicious windows when she caught a glimpse of movement. It was barely perceptible, just a slight shift in the shadows, but her trained eyes picked it up immediately. Someone was there, in a 4th-floor window on the eastern side of the building. "I've got a possible position," she whispered to Hayes, who immediately got on the radio to coordinate with the patrol below. Maria adjusted her scope and began calculating range and environmental factors. The distance was approximately 180 meters, well within her effective range. Wind was minimal, coming from the southwest at maybe 5 miles per hour. The angle was slightly elevated, requiring a minor adjustment to her point of aim. But, as she prepared to take the shot, something made her hesitate. The position she had identified was too obvious, too easy to spot. In her experience, truly skilled snipers didn't make such mistakes. This felt like a trap. Her suspicion was confirmed moments later when another gunshot ran. Maria's plan was risky, but it was based on a fundamental principle of sniper warfare that she hoped the enemy would follow: patience over aggression. She had noticed that the enemy snipers were taking their time between shots, relocating after each engagement to avoid counterattack. This suggested they were more interested in psychological warfare than simply racking up kills. They wanted to terrorize coalition forces, not just eliminate them. "Corporal Hayes," she whispered into her radio, "I need you to relay this message to Patrol 7 exactly as I say it. Tell them that in 30 seconds, I want them to create a distraction. Have one man break cover and run toward the southern alley. But make sure he's wearing full body armor and stays low." Hayes looked at her with concern. "Ma'am, that's asking someone to make themselves a target." "That's exactly what I want," Maria replied, never taking her eyes off her scope. "Trust me." As Hayes relayed the instructions, Maria positioned herself at the window and began scanning the area where she expected the enemy sniper to appear. Her theory was that the enemy shooter would be unable to resist such an obvious target, but in taking the shot, he would reveal his position. She counted down in her head: 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10 seconds. At exactly 30 seconds, she saw a figure break from cover below and sprint toward the alley just as she had instructed. Almost immediately, a muzzle flash erupted from a second-floor window of a building she hadn't been watching. The enemy sniper had taken the bait. Maria had been tracking the window where the flash appeared, and she saw the shooter for just a split second as he pulled back from his firing position. It was enough. She adjusted her aim and squeezed the trigger. The shot took less than a second to travel the 250 meters to its target. Through her scope, Maria saw the enemy sniper jerk backward and disappear from view. She had scored a hit, but she couldn't tell how serious it was. "Target down," she reported into her radio. "Patrol 7, you should be clear to move." But even as she spoke, Maria knew this was far from over. The intelligence reports had suggested multiple enemy snipers, and eliminating one wouldn't end the threat. In fact, it might make the others more dangerous as they adapted to the fact that they now faced a capable opponent. Over the next hour, Maria maintained her overwatch position while the patrol was successfully evacuated and medical teams retrieved the wounded. But she used this time to study the area more carefully, trying to understand the enemy's tactics and identify their likely positions. What she discovered was disturbing. The enemy snipers had turned this entire district into a carefully prepared killing ground. They had multiple prepared positions, pre-planned escape routes, and what appeared to be an extensive network of tunnels and hidden passages that allowed them to move unseen between buildings. The building where she had eliminated the first sniper showed evidence of long-term occupation. Through her scope, she could see that the windows had been reinforced with sandbags, creating stable firing positions while maintaining concealment from outside observation. There were also what appeared to be communication cables running between buildings, suggesting the enemy snipers were in constant contact with each other. As the afternoon wore on, Maria began to realize that she was facing something unprecedented in her military experience. These weren't just skilled individual shooters. They were part of an organized system designed to control urban terrain through precision psychological warfare. Captain Miller's voice came over the radio with another urgent situation. "Overwatch, we've got a medical convoy trying to reach the hospital in Grid Square 6-8-9-1. Intelligence suggests the route should be clear, but given what happened today, we need Overwatch coverage." Maria checked her map and calculated the distance. The medical convoy route would take it through 3 different areas where enemy snipers could potentially engage. Providing effective overwatch would require her to move to a different position with better sight lines. "Roger that, base. I'm relocating to position Charlie for better coverage of the convoy route." Position Charlie was located in a damaged mosque about 600 meters from her current location. Getting there would require moving through areas where enemy snipers might be watching, but it was the only position that would give her the angle she needed to protect the medical convoy. Maria gathered her equipment and prepared to move. Corporal Hayes would remain at the current position to maintain communication with the base, while Maria made the dangerous journey alone. This was standard operating procedure for snipers, who often worked better in isolation where they could move quickly and quietly without coordinating with other personnel. The route to position Charlie took her through the basement levels of several connected buildings. These underground passages had been created by civilians during the early days of the conflict, providing safe movement between structures when the streets became too dangerous. The military had adopted these routes for their own use, but Maria knew that if coalition forces knew about them, the enemy probably did too. She moved carefully through the dark tunnels, using night vision equipment to navigate while keeping her rifle ready for immediate use. Every sound made her freeze and listen carefully. Every shadow could hide an enemy waiting in ambush. The underground passages that provided safety also created the perfect environment for close-quarters combat, where her long-range advantages would be neutralized. After 20 tense minutes, Maria reached position Charlie and climbed to the third floor of the mosque, where she had a commanding view of the convoy route. The medical vehicles were already visible in the distance, moving slowly through the debris-filled streets. She could see the red crosses clearly marked on their sides, but she knew that wouldn't necessarily protect them from enemy fire. As she settled into her new position and began scanning for potential threats, Maria's radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. The voice was calm, professional, and spoke in accented English. "American sniper, you shoot well. But this is our city, and you are not welcome here." The transmission had come over the same frequency that coalition forces were using for operational communications. Somehow, the enemy had accessed their radio network and was listening to their communications. This explained how they always seemed to be one step ahead of coalition tactics. Maria keyed her radio carefully, unsure if she should respond, but deciding that intelligence gathering was worth the risk. "Who is this?" "I am someone who has been waiting to meet a worthy opponent," the voice replied. "Your shot this afternoon was impressive, but it was also lucky. Would you like to test your skills against someone who has been fighting in this city for 2 years? The challenge was clear, but Maria recognized it as a tactical error on the enemy's part. By engaging in conversation, the enemy sniper was revealing information about his experience level and psychological state. He was confident, perhaps overconfident, and he was allowing ego to influence his tactical decisions. "Base, are you monitoring this transmission?" Maria asked on a separate channel. "Affirmative, Overwatch. We're trying to triangulate the source, but he's using a sophisticated transmission system that's hard to track." Maria made a decision that would define the rest of her mission. Instead of simply trying to protect coalition forces from enemy sniper attacks, she would actively hunt the enemy shooters using their own confidence against them. "Unknown caller," she said into the radio. "If you want to test skills, then let's make this interesting." The medical convoy approaching grid 6-8-9-1 is off limits. Those are wounded soldiers and medical personnel. But once they're clear of the area, we can discuss terms. There was a long pause before the enemy sniper responded. "You have honor. I respect this. The medical vehicles will not be touched. But when they are gone, we will see who is the better shooter." Maria watched through her scope as the medical convoy moved slowly through the danger area. True to his word, the enemy sniper made no attempt to engage the vehicles. This told her several important things about her opponent. He had a personal code of ethics. He was confident enough to pass up tactical opportunities in favor of personal challenges, and he was probably acting independently rather than following strict military orders. Once the convoy had safely exited the area, Maria began the most dangerous phase of her mission. She was about to engage in a sniper duel with an opponent who knew the terrain perfectly and had been preparing for exactly this type of confrontation. The enemy's first move came 20 minutes later. A single shot rang out, striking the wall just inches from Maria's position. The bullet had come from a building approximately 400 meters away, and the accuracy was impressive. The enemy had identified her position despite her careful concealment. But the shot also gave Maria the information she needed. Based on the angle and impact point, she could calculate the enemy's approximate position. She moved carefully to a different window and began scanning the area where the shot had originated. What she found surprised her. The building where the enemy sniper was positioned was one that had been supposedly cleared by coalition forces just 2 days earlier. Somehow, the enemy had reoccupied the position without being detected. This suggested access to intelligence about coalition operations that went beyond simple radio interception. Maria took careful aim and fired a single shot at the window where she had detected movement. Her bullet struck the window frame, sending fragments of concrete and metal into the room. She didn't expect to hit the enemy sniper, but she wanted to test his reactions and force him to reveal more about his position. The response came immediately. 2 shots in rapid succession, both striking very close to Maria's new position. The enemy had tracked her movement and adjusted his aim accordingly. He was every bit as skilled as his reputation suggested. For the next hour, Maria and her opponent engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Each would fire a shot, forcing the other to relocate, then try to anticipate where their opponent would appear next. It was a battle of patience, skill, and psychological warfare where the slightest mistake would be fatal. During this exchange, Maria began to notice patterns in her opponent's behavior. He preferred elevated positions with multiple escape routes. He never fired more than 2 shots from the same location. He was left-handed, based on the angles of his shots. And he had an intimate knowledge of the city's layout that suggested he had either grown up here or had been operating in this area for an extended period. More importantly, Maria realized that while she was engaged with this particular sniper, his partners were probably repositioning themselves to create a crossfire situation. She was falling into the same trap that had claimed the Navy SEAL teams before her. "Base, this is Overwatch," she said quietly into her radio. "I'm engaged with one enemy sniper, but I suspect there are others moving to flank my position. I need immediate intelligence on any movement in the surrounding buildings. Overwatch, we're showing thermal signatures in at least 3 different buildings around your position. You need to extract immediately." But Maria knew that attempting to extract now would expose her to fire from multiple directions. Instead, she made a decision that went against all standard operating procedures, but seemed to offer the only chance of survival. "Enemy sniper," she said into the radio. "It seems your friends are joining the party. That's not very sporting of you." The response came back immediately. "A warrior uses all available advantages. But perhaps you would prefer to settle this in a more traditional manner." "What do you have in mind?" Maria asked, while simultaneously planning her next move. "1 shot each, from positions of our choosing. Winner takes the field, loser withdraws. No interference from others." It was an insane proposition, but Maria realized it might be her only chance to level the playing field. If she could eliminate the primary enemy sniper in single combat, the others might lose their coordination and become vulnerable to conventional tactics. "Agreed," she said. "But we do this properly. 60 seconds to choose positions, then a signal to commence fire." The 60 seconds felt like an eternity as Maria positioned herself for the shot that would define her military career. She had chosen a spot on the 5th floor of a partially destroyed office building, where a large hole in the exterior wall provided an excellent field of fire while keeping her concealed from most angles. Her rifle was positioned on a makeshift rest created from debris, giving her the stability she needed for a precision shot at long range. Through her scope, Maria scanned the area where she expected her opponent to appear. Based on their previous exchanges, she had identified 3 likely positions he might choose: a water tower 450 meters to the northeast, a church bell tower 380 meters to the northwest, or a high-rise apartment building 520 meters due north. Each position offered different advantages and challenges, and her opponent's choice would tell her a lot about his tactical thinking. She forced herself to control her breathing and heart rate, using techniques she had learned years ago in sniper school. In situations like this, physiological control was just as important as marksmanship skill. A single extra heartbeat could throw off a shot at long range, and the adrenaline coursing through her system right now could easily cause a fatal miscalculation. The radio remained silent as both snipers prepared for their duel. Maria knew that dozens of coalition personnel were monitoring this frequency, waiting to see the outcome of a confrontation that had taken on significance far beyond its tactical importance. Word of the sniper duel had spread through the base, and everyone understood that this was about more than just eliminating an enemy threat. It had become a test of skill, and, well, that would determine who controlled this urban battlefield. As the 60-second preparation period neared its end, Maria caught a glimpse of movement in the church bell tower. It was subtle, just a slight shift in the shadows, but her trained eyes picked it up immediately. Her opponent had chosen the middle distance option, probably calculating that it offered the best balance between accuracy and reaction time. Came the voice over the radio. Maria had already adjusted her aim point to the bell tower, calculating the range at 380 meters with a slight crosswind from the east. The environmental conditions were manageable, but the shot would require perfect execution. Through her scope, she could see the dark opening of the bell tower where her opponent was positioned, but she couldn't make out any details of the person inside. The rules of their duel were simple. Each sniper would fire one shot when ready, with no time limit. It would be a pure test of skill, nerve, and tactical judgment. Whoever missed or hesitated would likely die, as the other would immediately follow up with additional shots. Maria settled her crosshairs on the center of the bell tower opening and began her final preparation sequence. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate, and entering the almost meditative state that allowed for perfect shot placement. The rest of the world faded away until there was nothing but her rifle, her target, and the mathematical precision required to put a bullet exactly where she intended. The shot came without warning. Not hers, but her opponent's. The bullet struck the concrete wall just 2 feet from her position, sending fragments of stone and dust across her face. The accuracy was incredible, closer than any of his previous shots, but it was still a miss. Maria didn't hesitate. In the split second after her opponent's shot, she knew he would be momentarily blinded by his own muzzle flash and unable to see her return fire. She squeezed her trigger in one smooth motion, feeling the familiar recoil of her rifle as the bullet left the barrel. Through her scope, she watched her bullet's flight path intersect with the bell tower opening. She saw a brief spray of blood, followed by a figure tumbling forward and out of the tower opening. The enemy sniper fell 4 stories to the street below, his rifle clattering down beside him. Target eliminated, Maria reported into her radio, but even as she spoke, she was already scanning for the other enemy snipers she knew were in the area. The response from the base was immediate and enthusiastic. Outstanding shot, Overwatch. We're showing no more thermal signatures in your immediate area. The other enemy snipers appear to have withdrawn. But Maria's celebration was short-lived. As she watched the street where her opponent had fallen, she saw something that made her stomach clench with dread. The enemy sniper was still moving. Somehow, he had survived the 4-story fall and was attempting to crawl to cover. This presented Maria with a moral and tactical dilemma. Her opponent was clearly severely wounded and no longer posed an immediate threat. Military rules of engagement were clear about the treatment of wounded enemies. But she also knew that if he survived, he might provide intelligence about the enemy sniper network that had been terrorizing coalition forces. Before she could make a decision, her radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. American sniper, you shoot well. But this is not over. The voice was different from her previous opponent. There was indeed more than one enemy sniper, and now she was facing a new challenger who had presumably witnessed the entire duel. My friend was careless, the new voice continued. I will not make the same mistake. Maria immediately began scanning for this new threat while simultaneously planning her extraction from her current position. She had been stationary too long and was now vulnerable to observation and attack from multiple directions. The new enemy sniper's first shot came from a completely unexpected direction. Instead of firing from one of the elevated positions Maria had been watching, the bullet came from street level, striking the building below her position. The shot was clearly intended as a ranging round, testing the distance and environmental conditions. This told Maria that she was dealing with someone more methodical and cautious than her previous opponent. This new sniper was gathering information before attempting a killing shot, suggesting greater tactical discipline and possibly more extensive training. She moved carefully to a different window, maintaining her elevation but changing her angle of observation. As she relocated, she caught sight of movement in the street below where the first enemy sniper had fallen. Two figures in civilian clothing were dragging the wounded sniper toward a building entrance. This confirmed that the enemy snipers were part of a larger network with medical support and extraction capabilities. "Base, this is Overwatch," Maria reported. "I'm observing what appears to be enemy medical evacuation in my previous target area. Requesting guidance on engagement." The response came from Captain Miller himself. "Overwatch, medical personnel are protected under rules of engagement, regardless of which side they're on. Do not engage unless they present a direct threat." Maria understood the legal and ethical basis for this order, but it frustrated her tactically. The enemy network was clearly well organized and prepared for casualties, while coalition forces were operating under rules that limited their ability to disrupt enemy support systems. The second enemy sniper's next shot came much closer, striking the window frame just inches from where Maria had been positioned moments earlier. If she hadn't moved when she did, the bullet would have found its target. Her new opponent was not only methodical, but also extremely skilled at tracking movement and predicting position changes. For the next 30 minutes, Maria found herself engaged in another deadly game of cat and mouse, but this time against an opponent who seemed to learn from every exchange. Each time she fired, his return shot came closer to her position. Each time she moved, he seemed to anticipate her new location more accurately. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Maria was pinned down by an enemy who was gradually gaining the upper hand, while other enemy snipers were potentially moving into position to create a crossfire. She needed to change the dynamic of the engagement before she found herself completely surrounded. "Base, this is Overwatch. I need immediate smoke cover on grid reference 4-7-3-2. I'm going to attempt a flanking maneuver." "Roger, Overwatch. Smoke rounds incoming in 30 seconds. Maria used the time to plan her movement carefully. Instead of trying to maintain her elevated position and fight on the enemy's terms, she would descend to street level and attempt to close the distance. In close-quarters urban combat, her mobility and training advantages might overcome the enemy's superior knowledge of the terrain. The smoke rounds impacted exactly on target, creating a thick gray cloud that obscured vision throughout a two-block area. Maria immediately began her descent, moving quickly but carefully through the damaged building towards street level. She carried her rifle in a ready position, knowing that she might encounter enemy personnel at any moment. As she reached the ground floor, Maria could hear movement in the surrounding buildings. The enemy snipers were also repositioning, probably trying to maintain visual contact while staying concealed within the smoke cloud. This was exactly what she had hoped for. By changing the engagement parameters, she had forced her opponents to react instead of dictate the terms of battle. The smoke provided concealment, but it also created risks. Maria couldn't see potential threats any better than they could see her. She would have to rely on her other senses and her training in close-quarters combat to navigate through the urban maze without walking into an ambush. She moved carefully through the streets, using doorways and vehicle wreckage for concealment while advancing toward the area where she believed the second enemy sniper was positioned. Her plan was simple: get close enough to eliminate the threat with precision fire while using the smoke to mask her approach. As she rounded a corner, Maria came face to face with an enemy fighter who was clearly as surprised to see her as she was to see him. He was carrying an AK-47 rifle and appeared to be positioning himself to provide support for the enemy snipers. For a split second, both combatants froze in mutual surprise. Training and muscle memory took over. Maria's rifle was already in a ready position, and she fired instantly, striking the enemy fighter's center mass before he could bring his weapon to bear. He collapsed immediately, but the sound of her shot would alert every enemy in the area to her position. She moved quickly away from the engagement site, knowing that she had perhaps 30 seconds before enemy personnel would converge on her location. The smoke was beginning to thin, and her concealment advantage would disappear within minutes. Maria's radio crackled with another transmission from the enemy sniper. Clever, American. But now you are on our ground, playing our game. The voice came from somewhere close, probably within 100 meters of her position. This was both dangerous and advantageous. Dangerous because the enemy sniper was close enough to engage her with devastating effect, but advantageous because she was now within range for her own precision fire. She took cover in the doorway of a damaged shop and began scanning the surrounding area through her rifle scope. The thinning smoke still provided some concealment, but she could see movement in several buildings around her position. The enemy had indeed surrounded her, but they seemed to be waiting for the smoke to clear completely before engaging. This gave Maria a narrow window of opportunity. If she could identify and eliminate the primary threat before the smoke cleared, she might be able to fight her way out of the encirclement. But if she waited too long, she would face overwhelming odds in an environment where the enemy held every advantage. Through a gap in the smoke, she caught sight of a muzzle flash from a second-story window about 80 meters away. The enemy sniper had fired at something, probably trying to flush her from cover, but the shot hadn't been aimed at her position. This told her that he didn't have a clear visual on her current location. Maria adjusted her aim and fired a single shot at the window where she had seen the muzzle flash. Her bullet struck the window frame, but she couldn't tell if she had hit her target. What she could see was that the return fire was immediate and accurate, striking the concrete just inches from her head. The final phase of this deadly encounter was about to begin, and Maria knew that everything would be decided in the next few minutes. She was trapped in enemy territory, surrounded by hostile forces, and engaged with an opponent who had proven himself to be every bit as dangerous as his reputation suggested. But she also had advantages that her enemies might not fully appreciate: her training, her determination, and her refusal to accept defeat even in the most hopeless situations. As the smoke began to clear, Maria found herself in the most dangerous situation of her military career. She was surrounded by an unknown number of enemy fighters in urban terrain they knew intimately, while she was operating alone with limited ammunition and no immediate prospect of reinforcement. Every tactical principle she had learned suggested that her current position was untenable, but retreat was not an option with coalition lives depending on her success. She pressed herself against the concrete wall of the damaged shop, using the narrow doorway for both concealment and protection while she assessed the tactical situation. Through her rifle scope, she could see movement in at least 4 different buildings surrounding her position. The enemy had indeed set up a coordinated ambush, probably planning to eliminate her the moment the smoke cleared completely. But Maria had noticed something during her scan that gave her a slight tactical advantage. The enemy positions were all focused on the street where she had been moving, suggesting they were tracking her last known location rather than her current position. If she could relocate without being detected, she might be able to engage them from an unexpected angle. The building she was currently using for cover appeared to connect to an adjacent structure through a partially collapsed wall. If she could move through this opening without being observed, she would be able to access a different street and potentially flank the enemy positions. Maria keyed her radio quietly. "Base, this is Overwatch. I'm surrounded but mobile. Need you to monitor enemy radio traffic and relay any intelligence about their movements." "Roger, Overwatch. We're intercepting multiple transmissions in Arabic. Appears they're coordinating a sweep of your last known position. They seem to think you're still in the original building." This confirmed Maria's assessment. The enemy was making the classic military mistake of fighting the last battle instead of adapting to current conditions. Their intelligence was approximately 5 minutes old, which in urban combat was enough time for the tactical situation to change completely. She moved carefully through the collapsed wall into the adjacent building, testing each step to avoid creating noise that might reveal her position. The structure was severely damaged, with debris scattered throughout, and multiple holes in the walls that could provide both firing positions and escape routes. As she navigated through the building, Maria began to understand why the enemy snipers had been so effective in this urban environment. The damage from months of warfare had created a 3-dimensional maze where traditional military tactics were almost useless. Someone with intimate knowledge of these conditions could move freely, while conventional forces remained trapped by their own doctrinal limitations. From her new position, Maria had a clear view of two enemy positions that had been hidden from her previous location. In a third-floor window of a building about 120 meters away, she could see a sniper with a Dragunov rifle scanning the area where she had been moments earlier. In a different building, she spotted what appeared to be a spotter with binoculars providing target information to the shooter. The tactical picture was becoming clearer. The enemy network consisted of sniper-spotter teams working in coordination, with additional personnel providing security and support. This explained their effectiveness against previous coalition counter-sniper operations. They were not just individual marksmen, but organized teams with defined roles and responsibilities. Maria positioned herself at a window that gave her a clear shot at the enemy sniper while keeping her concealed from the spotter's position. The range was well within her effective capabilities, and the environmental conditions were favorable. But she also knew that as soon as she fired, her position would be compromised and she would face immediate retaliation from multiple directions. She decided to take the calculated risk. The enemy sniper was clearly the most dangerous immediate threat, and eliminating him would disrupt their coordination even if it exposed her to counterattack from other positions. Maria took careful aim, accounting for the slight elevation difference and minimal wind conditions. Through her scope, she could see the enemy sniper clearly as he continued to scan the area where he expected her to appear. He was completely focused on his assigned sector, following the same tactical discipline that had made these teams so effective. She fired a single shot that crossed the 120-meter distance in less than a quarter second. The bullet struck the enemy sniper in the upper chest, spinning him away from his rifle and out of view. It was a clean hit, but Maria didn't have time to confirm the kill because return fire erupted immediately from multiple positions. Bullets shattered the windows around her as enemy personnel responded to her shot. Maria rolled away from the window and moved quickly to a different position within the building, expecting the enemy to focus their fire on her last known location. Her tactical training had taught her never to remain stationary after engaging a target, especially when facing multiple opponents. As she relocated, Maria's radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. "Very good, American. You learn quickly, but now you face the test that destroyed your Navy SEALs." The voice belonged to a different person than either of her previous opponents, suggesting that she was indeed facing a larger network than intelligence had estimated. But there was something in the tone that made Maria pause. Respect. Her enemies were acknowledging her tactical competence even as they prepared to eliminate her. "Base, this is Overwatch," she whispered into her radio. "Confirm enemy strength estimates. I'm observing more personnel than briefed. Overwatch, we're showing thermal signatures in 6 different buildings around your position. We also have multiple radio intercepts suggesting coordinated movement. You need immediate extraction." Maria knew that extraction was not tactically feasible. She was too far from friendly lines and surrounded by hostile forces. But she also realized that her mission objectives had evolved beyond simple counter-sniper operations. She was now gathering intelligence about an enemy network that posed a strategic threat to coalition operations throughout this urban sector. "Base, negative on extraction. I'm obtaining valuable intelligence on enemy tactics and organization. We'll continue mission as long as tactically feasible." The response from Captain Miller was immediate. "Overwatch, that's a negative. Your survival is more important than intelligence gathering. We're organizing a rescue operation." But Maria had already made her decision. The rescue operation would put additional coalition personnel at risk, and she was in a better position to eliminate the enemy network from her current location than any external force could achieve. She would continue the mission until the threat was neutralized or she was no longer capable of fighting. Over the next hour, Maria engaged in the most intense urban combat of her career. She moved constantly through the damaged buildings, using her knowledge of military tactics and her superior marksmanship to eliminate enemy personnel one by one. But her opponents were adapting to her methods, and each engagement became more dangerous than the last. She eliminated a second sniper from a position 180 meters away, using debris for concealment while delivering a precise headshot through a narrow window opening. But the return fire was immediate and coordinated, forcing her to abandon that position as automatic weapons fire tore through the building around her. In a third engagement, she eliminated an enemy spotter who had been directing fire against her position. But as she moved to escape the inevitable counterattack, she nearly walked into an ambush set by enemy personnel who had predicted her movement route. Only her training in close-quarters combat allowed her to eliminate 2 enemy fighters with her sidearm before escaping through a hole in the building's wall. As the afternoon wore on, Maria began to understand the full scope of what she was facing. The enemy network was not just a group of skilled marksmen, but a well-organized military unit with sophisticated tactics and excellent local knowledge. They had turned urban warfare into a science, using the damaged cityscape as both weapon and shield in ways that conventional military doctrine hadn't anticipated. But she was also learning their patterns and limitations. They were excellent at defensive operations and ambush tactics, but they struggled to adapt when faced with an opponent who refused to follow predictable patterns. Their strength was their knowledge of local conditions, but this also made them dependent on familiar terrain and established positions. Maria decided to exploit this weakness by moving the battle to an area where neither side held a clear advantage. She began working her way toward the industrial district on the edge of the sector, where larger buildings and more open spaces would favor her long-range capabilities while reducing the enemy's ability to use concealment and close-range ambush tactics. The movement took her through increasingly dangerous territory, but it also drew the enemy away from their prepared positions and forced them to operate in areas where they were less comfortable. As she reached the industrial area, Maria found herself on more familiar tactical ground. Longer sight lines, clearer fields of fire, and terrain that favored precision marksmanship over close-quarters maneuvering. From a position on the roof of a factory building, Maria could see the enemy personnel attempting to follow her movement. They were operating in small teams, moving carefully from building to building while maintaining communication with each other. Their tactical discipline was impressive, but they were now playing Maria's game rather than their own. She engaged the trailing team first, eliminating 2 enemy personnel with precision shots at ranges exceeding 300 meters. The longer distances worked in her favor, allowing her to use her superior optics and marksmanship training to maximum effect. The enemy return fire was less accurate at these ranges, giving her time to relocate between engagements. As evening approached, Maria found herself preparing for what would be the decisive phase of a mission that had evolved far beyond anything she had expected. From her position in the industrial district, she could observe the enemy as they consolidated their forces in the urban area they had controlled for months. Through her rifle scope, she could see movement in at least 8 different buildings, suggesting that additional enemy personnel had arrived to reinforce the original sniper network. The tactical challenge was immense. She was facing an entrenched enemy force that knew the terrain perfectly and had prepared defensive positions designed specifically to counter sniper attacks. They had proven their ability to eliminate Navy SEAL teams, and they had successfully adapted to her unconventional tactics throughout the day. By any rational military assessment, her chances of success were minimal. But Maria had learned something crucial during her hours of combat with these opponents. They were supremely confident in their defensive capabilities, but had limited experience dealing with sustained offensive pressure from a single highly skilled operator. Their entire tactical system was built around the assumption that they could control the pace and location of engagements while their opponents reacted to their initiatives. She decided to reverse this dynamic completely. Instead of attempting a careful, methodical approach that would play to their defensive strengths, she would launch a sustained offensive assault that would force them to react to her actions while denying them time to coordinate their responses effectively. "Base, this is Overwatch," Maria said into her radio. "I need immediate fire support on grid references I'm about to transmit. I'm going to flush these targets out of their prepared positions and engage them in the open." Captain Miller's response was immediate. "Overwatch, fire support is available, but we need precise target coordinates. Friendly forces are operating in adjacent sectors." Maria had already identified the key buildings where enemy forces were concentrated. Her plan was to use artillery or air strikes to damage their prepared positions without necessarily eliminating the personnel, forcing them to relocate to alternate positions where they would be vulnerable to her direct fire. Base, I'm transmitting coordinates for 3 buildings in the target area. I need smoke and high explosive rounds, not for elimination, but for disruption. I want to force movement, not destroy structures. Over the next 10 minutes, Maria coordinated the most complex fire support operation of her military career. She called in precision strikes on specific areas of buildings where she had observed enemy activity, timing the impacts to create maximum disruption without providing enough warning for effective countermeasures. The first artillery rounds impacted exactly as planned, sending clouds of smoke and debris through the enemy positions while leaving the overall structures intact. Through her scope, Maria could see enemy personnel evacuating damaged areas and moving toward alternate positions that she had already identified and pre-targeted. As the enemy forces relocated, Maria engaged them with precision fire from her overwatch position. The longer ranges favored her superior optics and marksmanship training, while the enemy's hasty movement made them vulnerable to observation and targeting. She eliminated 3 enemy personnel in rapid succession as they attempted to reach new firing positions. But the enemy network proved more resilient than she had expected. Instead of panicking under the combined pressure of artillery strikes and sniper fire, they implemented a coordinated withdrawal that suggested extensive training and preparation for exactly this type of assault. They were falling back in good order, maintaining communication, and setting up interlocking fields of fire to cover their movement. Maria realized that she had underestimated her opponent's military professionalism. These were not just skilled marksmen, but trained soldiers who understood small unit tactics and could adapt to changing battlefield conditions. Defeating them would require more than superior individual shooting skills. As the enemy completed their withdrawal to secondary positions, Maria made a decision that went against every principle of sniper warfare she had ever learned. She would abandon her overwatch position and pursue them into close-quarters combat, where her training advantages might overcome their superior numbers and local knowledge. She gathered her equipment and began moving toward the urban area where the enemy had established their new defensive line. The approach would take her through open ground that offered no concealment and multiple opportunities for enemy observation and fire. But she calculated that her opponents would not expect such an aggressive move from a single operator, and their defensive positions were probably oriented toward longer-range threats. The movement across open ground was the most dangerous few minutes of Maria's military career. She used every available piece of cover, timing her advances to coincide with artillery impacts that would mask her movement and distract enemy observers. Twice she had to freeze in minimal cover as enemy personnel scanned the area where she was concealed, but her camouflage and positioning kept her undetected. As she reached the edge of the urban area, Maria could see that the enemy had established a defensive perimeter using interconnected buildings and prepared firing positions. It was a textbook small unit defensive setup that would be extremely difficult to assault with conventional tactics. But Maria wasn't planning a conventional assault. Instead of attacking the defensive perimeter directly, she identified a gap in the enemy's observation coverage and infiltrated their position from an unexpected direction. Using the same damaged underground passages that had allowed her to move safely earlier in the day, she penetrated deep into the enemy's defensive area before they realized she was among them. The close-quarters combat that followed was intense and chaotic. Maria moved through the buildings using her training in urban warfare to clear rooms and eliminate enemy personnel at close range. Her superior individual training allowed her to prevail in several encounters where the enemy's advantages in numbers and local knowledge were neutralized by the confined spaces and rapid pace of engagement. But as she moved deeper into the enemy position, Maria began to understand the full scope of what she was facing. The intelligence estimates had been completely wrong about enemy strength. Instead of 3 to 5 individuals, she was facing what appeared to be an organized unit of at least 15 to 20 personnel with military training and sophisticated equipment. The realization came as she cleared a room and found herself face-to-face with an enemy communications center where multiple personnel were coordinating not just the local defensive effort, but what appeared to be operations throughout the entire urban sector. Maps on the walls showed coalition force positions, patrol routes, and planned operations. This was not just a sniper team, but an intelligence-gathering operation that had been compromising coalition security for months. Maria eliminated the communications personnel and began gathering intelligence materials, but she knew that her position was becoming untenable. The enemy was converging on her location from multiple directions, and she would soon be completely surrounded with no avenue for escape. Her radio crackled with a transmission from Captain Miller. "Overwatch, we're monitoring intense small arms fire in your area. What's your status?" "Base, I've penetrated the enemy position and discovered a major intelligence operation. I'm gathering materials, but I need immediate extraction. They're about to overrun my position." "Roger, Overwatch. Extraction team is inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Can you hold that long?" Maria looked around the communications center and made a rapid assessment of her tactical situation. 12 minutes was a lifetime in close-quarters combat, especially when facing overwhelming odds. But the intelligence materials she had discovered were potentially crucial to coalition operations throughout this sector. "Base, I can hold for 12 minutes, but I need continuous fire support to keep enemy forces at distance." What followed were the longest 12 minutes of Maria's military career. She used the communications center as a defensive position, utilizing its concrete construction and limited access points to channel enemy attacks into areas where her superior marksmanship could overcome their numerical advantage. The artillery support she had requested kept larger enemy groups at distance while she dealt with individuals and small teams that managed to penetrate her perimeter. During this desperate defensive action, Maria eliminated 6 more enemy personnel and captured intelligence materials that would prove invaluable to coalition forces. But she also sustained her first combat injury when shrapnel from an enemy grenade caught her in the left shoulder, reducing her mobility and causing significant blood loss. As her strength began to fade, Maria could hear the approaching helicopters of the extraction team. But she could also see enemy personnel moving into position to attack the landing zone with anti-aircraft weapons. The extraction team would be flying into a trap unless she could neutralize the threat. Despite her injuries, Maria gathered her remaining strength and moved toward the enemy anti-aircraft position. Using the last of her ammunition, she eliminated 3 enemy personnel who were preparing to engage the incoming helicopters. The effort left her completely exhausted and barely conscious, but the extraction zone was secure. The rescue helicopters landed under heavy fire from remaining enemy personnel, but Maria's actions had eliminated the most serious threats. She was evacuated along with the intelligence materials she had captured, bringing to an end a mission that had lasted over 18 hours and fundamentally changed coalition understanding of enemy capabilities in this urban sector. In the weeks that followed, the intelligence Maria had captured led to a series of successful operations that dismantled the enemy network that had terrorized coalition forces for months. The sniper teams that had seemed unstoppable were revealed to be part of a larger intelligence and coordination effort that had been providing enemy forces with detailed information about coalition operations. Maria's actions had not only eliminated an immediate tactical threat, but had uncovered a strategic vulnerability that was affecting coalition operations throughout the region. Her willingness to take extraordinary risks and adapt her tactics to an unprecedented situation had achieved what months of conventional operations had failed to accomplish. The mission earned Maria several military decorations and recognition from the highest levels of command. But, more importantly, it demonstrated that individual skill and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds when combined with tactical innovation and unwavering commitment to mission success. The enemy snipers who had been described as unstoppable had finally met an opponent who refused to accept the limitations that had defeated previous attempts to eliminate them. Maria Santos had proven that with the right combination of training, skill, and courage, even the most dangerous opponents could be defeated by someone willing to risk everything for victory. Her story became legendary within military sniper communities, not just for the technical excellence of her marksmanship, but for her ability to adapt conventional tactics to an unconventional situation and achieve decisive success against overwhelming odds. The mission that began with simple counter-sniper operations had evolved into one of the most significant individual combat achievements in the history of modern warfare. Years later, when military historians analyzed the urban combat operations of this conflict, Maria's mission would be studied as an example of how individual excellence could achieve strategic results when supported by tactical innovation and unwavering determination. The woman who had taken on an impossible mission and emerged victorious had changed not just the outcome of a single battle, but the understanding of what could be accomplished by a single operator with the right training and the courage to risk everything for success. But as she prepared for her next engagement, Maria realized that something had changed in the enemy's behavior. Their radio traffic had increased, and their movement patterns suggested they were implementing a new tactical plan. Instead of continuing to pursue her into unfavorable terrain, they appeared to be withdrawing toward their original positions. "Base, this is Overwatch," she reported. "Enemy forces appear to be disengaging. They're moving back toward the original operational area." The response from intelligence personnel was immediate. "Overwatch, we're monitoring enemy communications. They're calling for reinforcements and preparing defensive positions. It appears they've decided to let you come to them rather than continuing pursuit." Maria understood the tactical implications immediately. The enemy had realized that they couldn't defeat her on equal terms, so they were returning to their strongest positions and waiting for her to attack on their terms. It was a smart tactical decision, but it also presented her with an opportunity she hadn't anticipated. If the enemy was consolidating their forces in defensive positions, they were also making themselves more vulnerable to the type of precision strike that had been impossible when they were dispersed throughout the urban area. For the first time since the mission began, Maria felt like she might be able to achieve decisive tactical success rather than simply surviving a series of individual engagements. But she also knew that the final phase of this battle would be the most dangerous yet. The enemy would be fighting from prepared positions with all their tactical advantages, and they would be expecting her attack. Everything would depend on her ability to identify and exploit the one weakness in what appeared to be an impregnable defensive network. The stage was set for a climactic confrontation that would determine not just the outcome of Maria's mission, but the future of coalition operations in this strategically vital urban sector. As the smoke continued to clear and the urban battlefield became visible again, Maria prepared for what might be the most intense combat of her military career. The enemy snipers had controlled this district for months, terrorizing coalition forces and proving themselves superior to every previous attempt to eliminate them. Now everything came down to a final confrontation between opposing philosophies of warfare, their intimate knowledge of local conditions versus her superior training and equipment. The outcome would determine not just Maria's survival, but the future of coalition operations in this entire sector of the city. As Maria prepared for what might be the most important shot of her career, she reflected on how this mission had evolved from a routine counter-sniper operation into something resembling a medieval duel. But she had learned long ago that warfare rarely followed textbook scenarios, and adaptability was often more valuable than strict adherence to doctrine. The next 60 seconds would determine not just her own survival, but potentially the outcome of coalition operations in this entire district. Everything came down to one shot. One moment of perfect precision in a war where nothing else had been certain. She moved to her chosen position, a partially collapsed office building that gave her a clear field of fire across the area where her opponent was likely to appear. Through her scope, she could see multiple possible locations where he might position himself. Her job was to identify the right one and deliver a perfect shot before he could do the same to her. The radio crackled one final time. "American sniper, may the best shooter win." Maria took a deep breath, settled her crosshairs on the most likely target area, and prepared to prove that her years of training and natural talent were enough to overcome an enemy who had turned urban warfare into a deadly art form. The future of this mission, and the lives of countless coalition soldiers, now depended on her ability to make one impossible shot under the most extreme pressure imaginable. G out. but this time from a completely different direction. The muzzle flash came from a building to the southwest, at least 300 meters from where she had been focusing. The enemy had used the suspicious window as a decoy, while the real shooter fired from an entirely different position. Clever, Maria muttered under her breath. She was dealing with opponents who understood the psychology of sniper warfare as well as the technical aspects. The patrol below was in serious trouble. They had now lost 2 men and were completely pinned down. The enemy sniper could take his time, picking them off one by one from multiple positions while remaining invisible to their return fire. Maria realized that conventional counter-sniper tactics weren't going to work here. She couldn't just locate and eliminate the enemy positions because they kept moving and using deception. She needed to think differently, to anticipate their moves rather than simply react to them. She began studying the entire area with fresh eyes, not looking for enemy positions, but for the patterns that would reveal their movement routes and tactics. How were they moving between buildings without being detected? How were they coordinating their attacks? How were they choosing their targets and timing? As she watched, another shot rang out, this time from yet another building. But this time, Maria was ready for it. She had been tracking the rhythm of the attacks and the intervals between shots. The enemy was being methodical, taking time to relocate between each shot to avoid counterfire. "Hayes," she said quietly, "I need you to coordinate with the patrol. I'm going to try something, but I need them to trust me completely." The next few minutes would determine whether Maria's unconventional approach would work or whether she would join the growing list of coalition snipers who had underestimated their deadly opponents. The real battle was just beginning.